Hey everyone, it's Aisling here today and we're back with another Leaving Cert 2024 prediction video. Today we're going to be talking about Leaving Cert English. For this video we worked with an expert teacher, so these predictions and insights which I'll also be sharing are based on years of experience and careful analysis of exam trends. So if you're trying to prepare for your Leaving Cert English exam, you're in the right place. Alongside these predictions and tips, I'll also be mentioning loads of resources throughout this video to help you learn some of those key topics, and they'll all be linked in the description down below. So make sure to like this video so you can save them all in one place and save yourself the hassle of trying to find them again. With that being said, let's jump into the video. Just a quick disclaimer before we get started, Leaving Cert predictions can be a great way to figure out which topics you might want to spend a little bit of extra time on or study in a bit of extra depth, but I would never recommend only studying predicted topics. The Leaving Cert papers can be unpredictable and are often influenced by a number of different factors, so you really want to get to know the basics of each topic first, and then if you have a little bit of extra time and you want to return to these topics, fire away. Also, I'm not the SEC, these are just educated opinions. Your guess as to what will be on the paper in June is probably as good as mine. But regardless of that, I'm going to be sharing with you some topics which you might want to brush up on before you sit your paper in June. Now, let's start with paper 1. This can also be known as the creative paper. And paper 1 will revolve around a theme that will be specified on the paper. Keeping this theme in mind can help you brainstorm ideas when you're answering a question in that composition section. So when it comes to the composition, it can be tricky to predict what topics might appear, but it's not impossible. There are common topics which resurface on the paper but are just phrased a little bit differently from year to year. So it is possible to prepare for paper 1 by critically thinking about the following list of topics, which I'm going to run you through, making notes on them, cultivating an opinion about them, and just kind of having that in your back pocket for June so you're not blindsided by a certain topic. The first thing which often appears in the paper are current social issues. So right now think about homelessness, fast fashion, climate change, addiction. You kind of want to have an opinion on all of these issues, just so if you are asked a question on one of these issues, your answer isn't wishy-washy. Moving on, we also have education, the pros and cons of education, what you would do to change it, maybe how technology or even AI, which is really topical, will impact education. Just have a think about that. The next is the importance of looking at the past, or imagining or looking to the future, that kind of creative writing, what you think the future might look like. There's also health and well-being is always important, creativity and the arts. It can appear in all different forms, so like film, literature, visual art. You should kind of have a couple of different movies or books that you enjoy that you kind of could weave into your answers a little bit just to make it stand out and show engagement with the creative arts. Another theme that we often see in the paper is leadership or heroes or power. Then we have trends and fashions in society, questions around social media, influencers is all very topical. You could definitely foresee a question on that on the paper. And then finally we have home, what it means to you, and we've also seen, themes surrounding displaced peoples on the paper. So definitely have a think about all of those topics. Remember, it's essential to have 2 of the following essay formats prepared for the day. So we have short stories, descriptive essays, discursive essays, personal essays, articles, and a speech or a speech for a debate. Don't limit yourself to one. If you don't like the essay title which appears on the day, you've really limited yourself. And this section is worth 25% of the entire paper, so you do need a backup. So yeah, don't limit yourself to one, and remember that an authentic voice is always rewarded in the exam. If you find yourself struggling to get to grips with this section, as many students do because of the high level of personal engagement required, you should check out our examiner annotated sample answers to find out what examiners are really looking for your answers for this section. We also have examiner annotated sample answers available for the studied poetry and drama sections, so if you find them helpful, be sure to check them out for those sections as well. Now on to the reading comprehension. While you can't predict the content that will appear in this section, you can practice. So remember the rules, comprehend the text, provide an opinion, and evaluate the style. Part 1 will be a direct question on your comprehension of the text. So, do you comprehend the text, and can you pick out specific pieces of content? Part 2 is the tricky one. This will be purely an opinion piece, so those who can think critically and write originally will be rewarded here. And part 3 will be about the style of the piece and whether or not the style is effective. So to prepare for this section, you want to brush up on your 5 language styles and stylistic features of each, and be prepared to pick out 4 stylistic features from each text. Let's take a look at some frequently asked questions for Part B's. In recent years, they've modernized the questions asked for this section. So the medium might be digital, it could be a school website or an online magazine, but the format has remained largely unchanged. So you should focus on articles, specifically opinion pieces and editorials, and open letters, as these appear most often on the paper. Also be aware of some modern formats which have been cropping up on the paper in recent years, so podcast scripts and blogs. And finally, one format which hasn't appeared on the paper in a while and which students are often unprepared for is the introduction to a collection of essays and texts. So make sure to brush up on this format and understand how to format it, and don't let it catch you out. Lastly, a top tip for paper 1 straight from an examiner is to keep up with the news a month before your exam. Being able to reference something current in your exam shows a student who's engaged with their society, and is really impressive for an examiner, particularly when a lot of what they read is generalizations. And on that point, you should avoid generalizations and cliches at all costs. Frankly, they cheapen your writing, and examiners are tired of reading the same old thing. Examiners will appreciate and reward diverse vocabulary and originality, so try to keep an original voice throughout your answers. Moving on to paper 2, or the study text paper, it can be generally easier to predict what content might appear in this paper. So we're going to focus right now on the single text. I'm going to focus on Shakespeare because this is what the majority of candidates will have studied. So for this section, you could expect to see a question on the character or a theme question, and the third possibility is a question on dramatic techniques. There are some key questions which are predicted for this section, which I'm going to run through now. The questions which have a good chance of coming up this year are firstly the women in the play, so Gertrude and Ophelia, how they're used as pawns, how they're manipulated. Also, it would be very impressive to an examiner to be able to blend into the themes of power and agency into a question on the women in the play. People often think of the questions which might appear as being only either character questions or theme questions, but they could appear as both, so make sure you consider the characters of the women in the play in the context of the theme of power. The next question which you might expect to see on the paper is a question on the character of Hamlet in relation to its foils in the play, looking at characters who are used to highlight the flaws of Hamlet, so Laertes, Fortinbras, or Horatio. You might be expected to contrast the characters of Hamlet and Claudius. Claudius as the character hasn't appeared in the paper since 2011, being specifically named on the paper, so there's a good chance that he could appear again. There's also an outside chance that you might be asked a question on the dramatic techniques in the play, so maybe a question on Hamlet's madness or the supernatural, specifically on the ghosts. And then in terms of themes, you want to take a look at power, deception, corruption, and justice. But with that being said, I would focus on a question on the theme of women in the play, so Gertrude and Ophelia. And to help you out with this, Studyclix has actually teamed up with expert teacher Peter Tobin to deliver a podcast series all on different topics within Hamlet, so on the characters and the themes, and we've dedicated a specific episode to Gertrude and Ophelia. So if you're preparing for that question, make sure to take a look at that. I used the Shakespeare podcast series for my own Leaving Cert, and there's some great insights in there, and they also touch on direct quotes, which you could include. So, I know students sometimes have trouble with picking out which are key quotes, so they do that for you in this series, so make sure to take a look at that. There are 9 other episodes in this series. Peter really goes in to dissect the play of Hamlet, walking you through key scenes, characters, quotes, and writing techniques, all in the context of Leaving Cert questions, so make sure to take a look at this to prepare for a question in this section. Now moving on to the poetry section. This year for poetry predictions, the main focus will be on Hopkins, Heaney, and Equilanon. We could see Meehan appear on the paper. She would be a bit more of a curveball, given that she appeared in the paper last year. But if we look at trends, Rich appeared on the paper 3 times in the last 4 years, so repetition is not unheard of. But if you focus on Hopkins, Heaney, and Equilanon, you hit those 3 main categories which appear on the paper every year. So a pre-1950s poet, an Irish poet, and a female poet. To prepare for this section, you should have notes on common themes or stylistic features of each poet, key quotes, and some personal engagement. If you're looking for some helpful insights into the poet, you should check out Studyclix podcast series on the 2024 poets. You can find transcripts or audio notes available for each of these podcasts on the Studyclix website, so you don't have to go writing out all the information by yourself. That's not all. We also have sample answers available on the website, so you can see how to structure this information into to a H1 answer, so be sure to check them out if you're looking to prepare for the poetry section. Now, for the final study text section, we're going to move on to the comparative. This year, all 3 modes will be featured on the paper, so literary genre, cultural context, and theme or issue. You want to focus on the following. For cultural context, you should focus on the values or attitudes which feature in the society that the central characters live in, or the central character's prospect for happiness, fulfillment, or success. For cultural context, the questions are usually framed through the lens of the central characters or the society they live in, so be prepared to relate the cultural context questions back to that. For literary genre, you want to prepare for a question on techniques which create a connection to the central characters in the play. 2 techniques are usually required here, or techniques which are crucial for an element of the plot, so the climax, the beginning or the end, just to name a few. And then for theme or issue, you want to be prepared to answer a question on how the theme or issue impacted you through your study of the text, or how the themes and issues in the play impact the central characters in the text. That's pretty much the main points for the comparative. Lastly, we're going to take a look at the unseen poetry section. So as implied by the name, the content which features in this section is unpredictable, but the questions which are asked are recycled and are very repetitive year on year. So firstly, we usually see questions on language and imagery, so brush up on your poetic techniques. They're going to be really important. Next, we see questions on the impact of the poem on you as the reader. And finally, questions also touch on the mood, theme, tone, or senses in the poem. Regardless of the questions asked, you want to revise your poetic techniques and have them scattered throughout your answer everywhere to maximize your marks. This question can often be forgotten by students, so make sure not to fall into this trap. And the best way to prepare for this section is to practice past exam paper questions, which can be found on Studyclix. There is only 1 unseen poetry question on the paper each year, so you might want to take a look at the mock paper questions, which are also available on Studyclix, for a little bit of extra selection. Remember, for the exam, write clearly, highlight keywords in the question, and allocate your time wisely. The best way to prepare is usually to practice past paper questions, so make sure you save yourself a little bit of time while studying to do that. But with that being said, those are all my insights and predictions for the Leaving Cert English paper 2024. Remember not to rely too heavily on these predictions, as they are just that. They're predictions, they're not facts. So, I can't guarantee that any of this will be on the paper in June. But with that being said, that's all I have for you today. Remember to subscribe, because there'll be lots more prediction videos coming in the next couple of weeks. And best of luck with all your preparations for the exam.